Verse 11 in Revelation 20. Then I saw a great white throne. And by the way, this is right after the passages that talk about the 1,000 years. The 1,000 years is, the millennium, 1,000-year millennium is spoken of only in one place. Now, don't get me wrong. I didn't just say the millennium is spoken of in only one place. But the specifics of it being 1,000 years is only spoken of in Revelation 20, and it's used, maybe 6 times or something like that in the verses preceding. But now we are after the millennium and we come to judgment. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it, Christ. Earth and sky fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. Pretty terrifying if earth and sky flee. And by the way, earth and sky, the word for sky and the word for heavens is either identical or very closely related. My book, Heaven in Chinese, is the word for sky. I think the same thing. Spanish is el cielo. Is that sky as well as heaven? Yeah. So that would be an example of it. Sky, heaven. So this is why heavens and earth gets a little confusing, because we think of heaven as only the dwelling place of God. But when it's plural heavens, it's the physical heavens, and sometimes the word can be interpreted as a single or a plural because it's generic. So it's the astronomical heavens. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and that's Genesis 1:1. And then in Revelation 21:1, then you've got a new creation that is new heavens and new earth. The old heavens and earth made new, just as our old bodies are made new in resurrection. Old heavens and old earth are made new in resurrection. And some people say, well, wait a minute, how could that be? Because 2 Peter 3 says they're consumed by fire, they're destroyed. There can't be any continuity between the old and the new. But we're new creations in Christ, right? You come to faith in Christ and you are a new creation. But like the day I came to faith in Christ, my dog didn't start growling at me. My mom didn't say, what have you done with my son Randy? She knew it was me. My dog knew it was me. And hey, if your dog knows it's you, there you go. There's, so I was new, and yet I was the old person made new. Likewise, what's resurrection? When people talk about the heavens and earth, they're going to be destroyed. Well, right. Well, what happens to our bodies when we die? People who are buried, and obviously if someone is their body is cremated, but people who were buried hundreds of years ago, or believers who were buried thousands of years ago, their bodies are now part of the ecosystem. They've been totally destroyed. But resurrection means old body becomes new body. It means old earth becomes new earth. So this is what's happening, because now we're moving from the millennium to the new earth. And this is the transition passage that separates the millennium, which happens, I believe, on the old earth, right? It's still the old earth, right? Because Christ has returned. But what happens at the end of it? The 1,000 years. What happens? A lot of you know and are nodding. Yeah, there's... Yes, a final fight, and there's rebellion and all of this. Well, that's all sin. There's not going to be any sin on the new earth. We're told that there's not going to be any sin. Okay, so that's still on the new earth. On the old earth, there's sin, and it's going to end in sin and rebellion and judgment and death. There's no death on the new earth. For there to be death, it must be the old earth. But here's the transition passage. So I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were open. So these are now the books where the works are written down. But then it says another book was open, which is the book of life. This is those who are saved, those who are redeemed, those who will dwell with God forever in heaven, which is about to be relocated down to the new earth, just a matter of verses later in Revelation chapter 21. The dead were judged according to what they had done as recorded in the books. Okay, now this is interesting. He doesn't say the dead were judged according to their absence from the book of life. Again, ask yourself what it could say. It could have said that. In a sense, you'd feel like, well, yeah, but how different is that? Well, the book and the books are different. But really what they're judged according to is not, what's stated they're judged according to is not what they didn't do, but what they did do. So ultimately, in the end, when we say, and sometimes this is said, well, it's not because of bad things anyone has ever done that they'll go to hell. It's only that they rejected Christ. But I don't think that's actually true to this passage. Well, of course, if you reject Christ, you won't go to heaven. But it's talking about being judged not by your lack of faith in Jesus, but by the works you have done. Now that's the difference between the unbeliever and the believer. Because eternity, your salvation, your lack of salvation comes in the fact that you have these works that are being judged as evil that are keeping you out of heaven. But when you go to heaven, you're not going to heaven because your works were good, because we've switched books now. It's not over here the books of the things you've done. It's the book of life, which is all about the grace of Jesus and his work for us. So verse 13, when I get through this, I'll open it up for questions, and I have a feeling there'll probably be some. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them. And so you get death and Hades. Now that's where you get to, is Hades by now, because paradise has been taken up into the very presence of God, is hell, the present hell, all that's left in Hades, and that's why it's called Hades. There's different interpretations on that. Death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what he had done. Again, judged by works. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. If anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown in to the lake of fire, and this is the eternal judgment.